Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey, women. Thank you so much for being here on the Moon Baby Magic podcast. My intention in everything I do at Moon Baby Magic is to support women in coming home to the sacredness and power that lives within their very bodies. So if you'd like to go deeper, a few resources for you. You can follow me on Instagram. I love to connect with women there. You can get the Womb Cycle Spotify playlists, your period prep guide, book an in-depth one-on-one virtual session, or shop herbal goodies. All of these are always included in the show notes of every episode, and I hope that they support you. Thank you. Let's get on to the show. Hey, wonderful women. Welcome back to another episode of the Moon Baby Magic podcast. This episode with Linda is really airing the perfect week as we have the eclipse this week, finishing out this eclipse season. Now, I'll be honest, I'm no astrologer. You can contact Amy, who was on last week, if you want an expert in astrology in your corner. But I am someone who is deeply affected by what's going on in the cosmos, and especially eclipses. They tend to bookmark really big transitions in my life. And I just want to say, for those of you listening, if you're feeling that too, it's okay to just be in it. I think I've said this so many times in the past couple weeks, but just reminding you that being present to what is arising within you and being present to your experience is enough. In Linda's episode today, she really takes us through her life that's taken so many twists and turns, and some might even call it a difficult life path. And she has this joy in the way that she understands and metabolizes her life experiences. So, yeah, I want to leave that tidbit today to just remind you that you are on your life path. You couldn't not be on your life path, and that it's okay to just be present. And the clarity comes when the clarity comes, and that's when decisions and changes can be made if need be. But the first step is just to be in it, right? Like we talk about that analogy with the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, and how the caterpillar literally turns into goop in that little cocoon and then emerges as a whole new creature. And the process isn't rushed. Nature isn't rushed. There's a season for everything. So, women, today on the podcast, we have Linda sharing her transformative journey through life's twists and turns. Linda shares her early initiations, including her menarche and her first sexual experience. You'll hear about her profound ayahuasca journey in the Amazon, meeting her ex in Hawaii, and the courage it took to leave that abusive relationship with 2 young daughters and move back to Australia. Linda reflects on her 2 hospital births, uncovering the truths about medical consent and her evolution from licensed midwife to sovereign practitioner. As she cares for her elderly mother, she shares a magical vision of familial spirits and the comforting wisdom she's gained about death as a gift. Linda is a woman walking her life path with a lot of trust and an open heart. So join us for this episode steeped in reverence for the sacred dance of womanhood. Welcome, Linda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. This is fun too, because this is actually the first time, and not everyone watches the video, but if you watch the video, my screen is like, my room is quite dark, so it's evening here, and it kind of feels like a different cozy vibe to record in the evening, but it's totally different for you because you're over there in the morning in Australia.
Yeah, isn't technology amazing like that? I just think it's so great. in the same time just doing this. It's like we're in different worlds, really.
I know.
Crazy.
And we were just talking about too how you're over there in spring or entering into spring, and we're over here in the northern hemisphere entering into autumn. So I'm kind of in this
Mm.
like descending autumn evening time, and you're in this ascending morning
Coming
springtime.
out. Yes. Yes. I was so excited to have warmer days.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to just share with everyone listening, if you'd like to, what phase of life you're in and what phase of your cycle you're in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, like you said, Natalie, I'm calling from Australia. I'm in a little town called Coffs Harbour. The traditional name is Gumbaynggirr country, so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the people, uh, the ancestors and traditional caretakers of this land, and yeah, just give big thanks.
Mm,
And yeah, jumping into me, where I'm at in my cycle at the moment, I'm in my maiden cycle. Um, I just bled last week. And yeah, I love bleeding.
mm, me
Nice.
too.
I always, yeah, I love seeing it when it comes. And I've always had really light periods, and I always feel really sad when it goes. It
Mm.
only hangs out for a couple of days. I feel like it's a guest. And I was like, please stay. He's like, I gotta go. I'm like, oh. Um, Yeah, and then in my life, I'm in my motherhood phase, but I feel like, especially with this last period and the moon cycle before that, I feel a lot of change happening, and I feel like I don't know if people listening believe in perimenopause because it's like,
Mm,
oh, you know, is it just another thing that the system diagnoses to create business? But I'm feeling a lot of change in my life, and I'm like, oh, maybe I am going through perimenopause. I'm going to be 40 this year, so I don't know if I'm just overthinking it, but I feel like I'm going through that threshold. Yeah. So my kids are older now. They're 14 and 12. So I've been in the motherhood phase for a while, and yeah, it seems right. Lots of things have happened. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I
Mm.
mean the thing like I don't totally resonate with perimenopause as like a condition, but more so as just like, even within our cycles, we have these crossover days of like you're in between the maiden and the mother, like you're almost to ovulation, but you're not quite there. And there's this like tension between the two. And so I
Yeah.
kind of think of perimenopause as that. It's like you're kind of like standing on that cliff right before menopause, and you're like, oh, what's it going to be like? And that's
Yeah.
on the spiritual level. And then on the physiological level, like your cycles are just changing and your hormones are changing.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
transition to anything.
Yeah. And it's a calling back to be more tender with my body. Because we can
Mm.
take it for granted, It's like, yeah, I'm so healthy, everything's great. And then you're like, wow, why am I sweating for no reason? And why do I feel so bloated? And why am I grumpy? Like, I'm getting everything I need. Like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm having a big change at the moment. Okay, just go with it. Up to
Mm.
self care, observe, stay excited. It's all good. So yeah, I think I emailed you before that I fully believe that life is just one initiation after
Yeah.
initiation, and we're constantly changing and growing and evolving. And if we don't, it gets stagnant and gets boring. So I feel like
Hmm.
that's the direction that's happening right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. I so agree that it's just like we are constantly being initiated. And I think as women, we're like quite lucky because our initiations are embodied, like they're in our bodies. We don't
Yeah.
have to go out and seek
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. They just naturally happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such a privilege. So great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, take me back. Take me back to your first initiation if you remember about your first bleed, your menarche.
Yeah, so I was I remember being in like primary school, and in here it's a little bit different from the States. We have like kindergarten to grade 6, which is like 12, 13 years old, and then you go into high school, which is like year 7 to year 12. And I remember being in year 5 or 6, so I was about 11 or 12, and all of my friends are getting their periods, and I didn't. And I was so jealous. I really wanted my period, and I had friends that were like, "Oh, I'm so sad. I got my period. This is like,
Mm.
such a bummer." And I would be like, I'm so envious of you. Like I had this drawing towards growing up. I was always looking forward to the next stage of my life. Um, I don't know, because being a Sagittarius, we're quite independent. We're always trying to get out and explore, and that was very much in my feminine energy as well. I was always like, I want to feel what it feels like to bleed. I want to feel, all the things. So in my group of friends, I was like one of the last ones to get it. So I didn't get my period until I was like 14. So,
Mm.
later, after everyone's had it for years, and I
Mm.
was always waiting for it. And then when I finally did get it, it was like one drop of blood on this beautiful, I had all the pads and tampons and all the things, that we're taught to have.
Yeah.
And I remember just having one drop, and I was like, oh. I kept changing my pad like I was, an experienced bleeder, but there was nothing on them. And my mum was laughing. Like she was just happy that I was excited about it. That it was like, it's welcome. You're a woman, but it's gonna get much more than that. And it never really did.
Mm.
Growing up, my younger sister, were really close. She's just under 2 years younger than me, and I think she got her period around the same time. So she was younger getting it, and she was heavy and pains, and I was so light, and I was envious of her to have more blood. I was like, it was just it was always this thing of like, yeah, they weren't an inconvenience to me. There was something that I really treasured and I loved, and I acted like I was in full period mode. Like when I would get it, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm resting. I'm being with my period,
Like even from
and
a young
everyone
age.
else from a young age, and everyone
Wow.
else would be like, stick a tampon in there, and continue. We used to play netball. I don't know if you guys know netball.
Yeah,
Netball's
I am
big here in
familiar.
Australia. Yeah, so and I would be like, I'm not doing anything. And I would just
Wow.
revel in my period. I just loved it so much. I just felt like a grown up. I just felt like an adult. I was always trying to be grown up. And then I was even the same with my sexual orientation. Like I was so keen to lose my virginity. So my family, I'm one of 5 children, and my parents were immigrants. They're Egyptian, and we were all born and raised here in Australia. And my parents, coming from a very religious, very strict background, they chose to have us with so much freedom.
Mm.
We were basically allowed to do whatever we wanted, and we always had friends over, and my parents didn't drink or smoke, so they didn't really have any idea about that life, but they wanted us to have the freedom. So they really
Um,
held that space for us to explore. So when I was 15, I was partying, I think in our generation back then, that's what we all did. We just wanted to experience fun. We didn't have phones and internet really. It was just parties every weekend and raves. And so I was very keen to lose my virginity, and I lost it at 15. So a year after bleeding, I started
wow, those
bleeding.
two initiations are close together.
So close together. And
Yeah.
so, and very, I was more keen to feel the sexual experience than I was to have a partnership and have sacred union and have that loving connection. I was more into, what does sex feel like? What does, it was the same with my period. It was like, I just want to evolve. I just want to experience. I just want to change. So in retrospect, looking back, I'm like, oh man, that was such a bad way of losing my beautiful virginity. I sort of just
Mm.
gave it away because I was so keen to grow. I'm not one to really have regrets in life, but if there was any, like, something that I could sort of tweak, it was probably that. I had older brothers, and they were like, oh no, because I was very like, this is virginity. I was so proud.
Mm.
And then I think my next initiation after that, I moved out of home really young. I moved overseas in my early 20s. I learned Hawaiian massage and I wanted to learn more, so I went over to Hawaii.
Oh,
I
wow.
fell in love with a Hawaiian. I got married, felt pregnant. So straight into it. And I remember before I met him, I remember speaking to spirit. I always had a connection with spirit, very deep. It was like I've never been a religious person, but I always felt like there was a conversation with God or spirit or whatever you want to call it. And I just felt very held and very protected. Um, yeah. And so traveling over there, I was like, spirit takes care of me. So when I fell in
How
love, I
old
was like,
were you when this happened, when you traveled to Hawaii?
I was probably, I think I was like 20 or 21. But before that, I went, I was like, after I turned 18, I went to South America. That was my first
Oh,
overseas trip. That was a big initiation as well. Um, I traveled to Ecuador and Chile for like uh, 8 weeks. Yeah, so just a couple months. And I wanted to try ayahuasca with a shaman. I saw a documentary on telly, and I was like, "That's what I want to do." So I went over there by myself, um, and it was amazing. It was so cool. It was I think I was that was so long ago. So I know it's a big hype at the moment. Everyone's like, "Yeah, plant medicine," and um, I think it's a bit sad that it's being used so much because
Mm,
it's such a sacred journey. Like, oh, it really. I remember it was sort of like a rebirth for me.
wow.
I yeah, I did it a couple times with the shaman and his son, and they didn't speak English, and I hardly spoke Spanish, so it was a very like you sort of just communicating with body language and those unspoken words and senses and I remember just feeling reborn afterwards and this tremendous connection to the earth and just going like, what are we doing? Like as humans, we're not really acknowledging, treasuring this beautiful planet that we live on. I
Yeah.
came out of it with that perspective. And then fast forward, I learned Hawaiian massage, went to Hawaii in 2006 or 2007. And I was, I don't know if you've been to Hawaii, but Hawaii is a very spiritual place. Hawaii
Mm,
is very spiritual, especially the Big Island. You've got an active volcano. Everyone salutes the Hawaiian goddess Pele. She's like a Kali, like a Sekhmet. She's
wow.
very fiery, very like, you know, thundering grace is a great way to put her. Like she'll just shake the earth, get rid of all the stagnant, crappy energy, and create a new foundation. And she does that within yourself. So,
Mm,
um, so going there, I felt her a lot. I was very nurtured by spirit. I was just house sitting different houses. I was doing a lot of massage. I was learning from different owners, and I met a beautiful Hawaiian man, and was very deeply connected to the ocean. He was a fisherman. It was just beautiful, big, beautiful energy in Hawaii. But I was young, and he was older, and I was very naive. I think when you're young, you're just sort of experiencing life.
yeah. For
Um, yeah, so probably about I don't know how long after we met. Like the way we met was even crazy. Like I was doing him like it was the day after Christmas. I was massaging and it was pouring. It was like hurricane weather and I saw him on the side of the road hitchhiking and I knew his brother. His brother was a lifeguard. So I was like, I know that person. I can give him a lift. And I was like, where are you going? He's like, anger management class.
Mm,
Okay, well, I'll take you to your anger management class. But that was like a sign, like, this is an angry person. But I didn't care. I was just like, Spirit takes care of me. And we just stayed together ever since. And then I realized later that his anger was a lot deeper than anything I could live with and
Mm,
co-parent with. He was addicted to methamphetamines. That was something
wow.
that was very new to me as well. It was such a big thing. So,
And is this, you
and I was,
have children with him?
I did have, yeah, my two children, but when they were 3 and 1, I decided to leave him and move back here to Australia.
Um, Children
Yeah,
were
so in
born in
Hawaii,
Hawaii.
no, we were living there, but because I had overstayed my visa, 'cause I loved
Uh,
it so much, I was an illegal immigrant. We were going through the process of the visa, the green card, whatever. And I was attending births. I was helping a home birth midwife, and I was a doula. But then when
wow.
I fell pregnant, we had a transfer for this twin birth, and one of the twins came out had already passed, was undetected. And that sort of shook me as I was pregnant. I was like, oh, what if I need an emergency transfer? I'm not going to be able to afford this helicopter. And even if I have a normal vaginal birth in the hospital, America is not very good with, you're still going to have like a $10,000 bill, even if you have a
Right.
normal vaginal birth. So I decided to come back home to Coffs Harbour. Um, and my partner came as well. We had the baby here at the local hospital. And then I did the same for my second child.
Yeah.
And then when they were 3 and 1, it was just too much. There was so much conflict, and it was a big, uh, yeah. Like I was planning to come back after some fight, but I don't know if you've ever experienced a domestic violent relationship. You have these big blow ups, and then you have this great sex, and you make up, and then you have these big blow ups, and
Mhm.
then you make up, and it's just this roller coaster. So there was a time when I was like, okay, I'm going. I bought tickets back to Australia for my children and I, and then we made up, but my tickets were unrefundable. So I offered my family if anyone wants to come over for my youngest one, her first birthday. It's very
Mm,
big in Hawaii, the first birthday. So my mum and my brother came over, and when you have family witnessing you in a violent situation, it's so much different from when they're not there. Like when you have someone who has known you your whole life, especially your mother and my brother, watch you in a very powerless situation, it gives you extra courage to stand up because to show them you don't want you don't want to disappoint them.
yeah.
I don't know if I'm making sense, but when you're in a situation by yourself and you're having a fight or an argument and it gets violent and you've got kids, you can sort of get through it and you just go, oh, it's love. But when you've got someone of your family that watch it and you're looking at them and you see their faces and you just realize that it's not sustainable, like it's just
Mhm.
not healthy. So by them coming over, it gave me the courage to be like, okay, we're going to go back. So I left, came back
Wow.
to Australia when they were 3 and 1, and I was in shock. I was so heartbroken. I was like, because I really loved him despite his
Yeah.
drug addiction. We were bonded. Like it was just such a big initiation in itself. Like love can do that. And I had these beautiful little girls. I've got two daughters,
Mm,
and um, came back and I dove straight into Kundalini yoga. I did a little Kundalini yoga in Hawaii, and it really helped me stay grounded despite everything that was happening. So when I came back, I did the teacher training and I loved it, and it really helped me get through my grief, and it really
see?
helped me find myself again as a single parent.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible that you were able to like pull yourself out of a situation that you know didn't serve you because that it's just not an easy thing to do. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it's like so much more complex than that. I haven't myself been
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
violent relationship in that way, but I have close people in my life who have, and to see that experience and like what it takes to pull yourself out when a lot of times these people are trying to pull you back in and you have
yeah,
this idea of love that's maybe love, but
yeah,
probably more like a trauma bond. Um,
yeah,
and I mean, so it sounds like what happened is you saw yourself from people who loved you's eyes. Is that
Yeah.
pretty accurate? And you're like, wow,
And
I can't
yeah.
actually do this.
And yeah, I just felt like I didn't want to disappoint them. Like I'm my whole life you try to, show your mom especially that you can handle. And then for her to come and visit you to see her granddaughter's birthday and she's seeing her own daughter get slapped around by the love of her life,
Mm,
it's just like, oh, like that's not the way it's supposed to be.
no.
And um yeah. I remember as a teenager, I had a friend who was in a domestic violent relationship. And I used to just say to her, "Why don't you just leave?" And she never left. And I couldn't grasp it in my mind. So, and then when it was happening, I was like, "Oh, thanks. Thanks, God. Like, you gave me the wisdom now because it's not that easy when you can't just say to someone, when you just leave." It's just like, it's so, you're so bonded, you're so intertwined with this person, especially when you've got children with them.
Yeah.
Um, and then the making up after these conflicts, it's just sort of brings you back together and it's like, okay, we can get through it. And that happens again and happens again. It's like, ugh, it's a very tricky situation. And it's not
Yeah.
just
And
as
I
simple
think
as like, leave. You just can't.
it's not. And I think there's also like this cultural narrative around like staying together for the kids, even if the relationship
Yeah.
terrible. And I
Yeah.
recently heard someone say, I think it was her name's Shalina and her username on Instagram is Rising Woman, and she posts a lot about
Mm,
relationships. And she said something like that's really like a cultural religious narrative, like a very patriarchal thing that we have stuck in a lot of our psyches that like, oh, staying together at all costs. And
yeah.
it's like for women who are in domestic violent relationships, like that if they're like victims of domestic abuse, like staying together isn't better for the kids. Like
Yeah.
leaving is going to be better for the family's nervous system because the mother is the nervous system of the family.
Yeah. Yeah. Big
Yeah.
time. Yeah. And I realized after leaving how much of my attention was focused on my children instead of on my partner, and trying to regulate his emotions and keep peace
Mm.
all the time. So when you're just focusing on your kids, it's a very different dynamic. So when I meet people who have recently separated, it's like, do you notice how much you're focusing more on your children than your partner? And they're like, yes. And it's just it's interesting because as mothers, they grow up so quick that it's so essential that we do focus on them. You can get so lost in keeping the harmony between your relationship. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was yeah. So
Well, I'm
yeah,
also
that
curious
was
to
an
hear
initiation in
too.
itself.
Yeah. I mean, a big initiation and like an initiation into choosing yourself, which I think that like we have the opportunity to choose ourselves like on so many of these steps in our path. I think it's like it's so much more challenging when we're girls and like in menarche and like our first sexual experience because we're in such a rush. And I hear that in
Yes.
your story, like, and I think it's such a common theme that like when we're younger, we're like rushing to get all these rites of passage and like we want to speed up time. And then I feel like at a certain point, we want to slow down time. And it's like, when are we actually
Yeah.
just here and choosing like each step of our path, like consciously choosing, okay,
Yeah.
where do I go from here? And where do I go from there? And I think as girls, it's okay that we are not in that because there is this
Mm,
like beauty and a gift to the spontaneity that comes in maidenhood because we don't really have that again in life. Um,
yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think that, like we wouldn't do some of the things we did. Like if you didn't have that, you probably wouldn't have like jumped on a plane to go take ayahuasca in like the Amazon
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
gone to Hawaii to go like get, like that gives us
Yeah.
the courage to choose our life path.
Beautiful.
I do think
Sets
it's
apart.
beautiful.
Yeah. And I feel like now, now that I'm older, I now have the ability to appreciate being slow, being present, not trying to rush, just being really okay. Which really is really interesting because when I was young, my mum used to read palms, and every time she read my palm, she'd always say, "You'd be happier when you're older."
Wow.
Every time she'd be like, "You work with women," and I was like, "What does that mean?" And it's like, you won't be happy until you're older, like like over 40, near 50." And I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
okay." So my whole life, I was like, "This isn't my happy stage." It sort of makes so much sense now. Yeah, and it's so yeah,
Wow. That's so interesting that your mom read your palms and like
she
especially,
did.
those two things that you would work with women and that you'd be happy when you're older. How
Yeah,
fascinating to like,
yeah, they were the main things. Yeah,
well, I'm
yeah.
curious to hear, you've kind of taken us up to, leaving your partner, you're leaving your children's dad. Is there anything you want to share about your births?
Um, oh, far out, Natalie. Like,
Mm.
oh. So when I was pregnant, I was in the birth space and I was working with these home birth midwives, and I thought I knew a lot about birth. I thought I knew how to advocate for myself. So when I gave birth at the local hospital here in Coffs, um, when you look back on things in your life and you don't remember much of the details, but you remember how you felt. You remember the feeling. It's sort of like when you
Yeah.
have a dream and you wake up and you're like, I don't remember really what happened, but I remember what it felt like. So the
Yeah.
feeling that I walked away with my first birth, I supposedly had a hemorrhage and I took arnica and they were very like, oh, she's a hippie. And I got a different vibe of service and of care because I was a little resistant. Like, I didn't want to do certain things. I didn't want the cannula. I didn't want, VEs. So I was treated with like, ugh, like, that type
Yeah.
of energy. But so I took arnica, and for 13 years, I thought that I had a pretty significant hemorrhage, like 1500 mil, and I relieved that with arnica. So when I was working in the system, this is a lot just recently. So yeah, going back to the story before, I did my Kundalini yoga teacher training. I was doing some yoga, and then I dove into becoming a midwife, and I did a 3-year degree over 5 years because I was a single mom, did it
Yeah.
part time, and then I worked in the same system that I gave birth in. I worked
Mm.
in the same hospital. So after working for a few years, I asked to have my medical records from my own two births. So with my oldest, Lava is her name. I was told I had a hemorrhage. I thought I took arnica. So for 13 years, I thought arnica was my go-to, and it helped me. It was fabulous. I do remember having a cannula, but I only thought it was for fluids because I was
Okay.
awake for like 3 days, and I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleep. First time
Yeah.
having a baby, I was just like any minute for 3 days.
Yeah.
So when I got my medical records, I found out that they they didn't let me have a physiological third stage. They did controlled cord traction where they pull my placenta out within about 2 minutes after my beautiful daughter was born. I received misoprostol,
My God.
kefazolin, 40 units of Synto, a Synto injection, um, everything. So I read all of this and I was just about to quit because I was so overworking in the system. I'd only been there for 3 years. I worked really hard to get my degree. So I was like, oh, I don't want to leave. But at the same time, I was like, this is killing
Mm.
me. So when I got my medical records, it was sort of like the cherry on top of like, what the fuck, like I
God.
didn't know I got any of that stuff. And no wonder I had trouble breastfeeding. And no wonder I was feeling shit and worked out. And no wonder, like it was such a moment of like realizing, like, whoa, that happened.
Well, how insanely manipulative that no one ever said anything to you.
Yeah,
And like it's so infuriating to me because your story doesn't even surprise me. Like when you mentioned the
yeah,
only thinking it was fluids, I was like, "Oh God, I know where this is going." But it's like
yeah,
just because that's a common story and for the women listening
yeah,
like me, this is a common story. Um
yeah,
it's like so absurdly abusive and
yeah.
manipulative and all of the things. And God, I'm just so sorry. And to find that out years later, like
Mm.
I can
Yeah,
imagine that just felt like a
like 13
slap in the
years.
face.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I was like, with my resignation letter, I was like, yeah, just found out my medical records. I was given all this stuff without my consent.
Wow.
This is not a surprise because this is what we do. This is what it's what they do. They, give you something. So don't worry about it. This is just to help stop you bleeding. Don't worry about it. This and that. Like, you just focus on your baby. Don't worry about it. We're taking care of you, but you're not. Like, you didn't ask.
One, like acting as
I've
if
never
you're,
taken Panadol.
yeah,
Sorry.
and, like, I was just gonna say it's like acting as if you're a dumb woman, like that women are dumb
Yeah.
and that can't possibly make
Yeah.
informed decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that happened. And then my second birth, um, I just remember feeling like they wanted to put a cannula in my arm and I was very resistant. And they just kept disturbing my birthing experience with wanting to put this cannula. And they send in another doctor and another one giving me the whole reasoning. You bled a lot. We want to give you this cannula. And I was like, no. And then my baby had MEC and they wanted to give me antibiotics. I think I succumbed to it at the end, and I went past 40 weeks with both my bubs, and my second had a lot of MEC, and they wanted to take her to the special care nursery, and I was like, no. So there was that energy. It was just
Yeah,
this whole, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. But
yeah.
in retrospect, I was like, I didn't even need to be there in the first place. I think
I
because I was staying at
know.
my mom's, I didn't want to make a mess. But I was like, I could have totally just had my babies there and it would have been fine.
I know. Well, it's like
Yeah.
all of these things that, and of course, like hindsight is 2020. And I think that, like you said, these initiations are that they're initiations and they teach
Yeah.
us so much about ourselves. I think a lot of women come to their sovereignty from having birth or experiencing like someone they love
Yeah.
giving. And it's like you learn that like all this stuff that happens in the hospital is just so much drama. And
Yeah.
like all these things like meconium and what going past 40 weeks and whatever, it's like actually not a big deal.
Yeah. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Utter bullshit. And then when you're in the system, working the system, you really take it all seriously because that's the way that you're trained. It's like, oh no, everybody's high risk. Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting. Um, Yeah. So even though those births were natural, as they say, they weren't. They were still
So was it
very
the same with
hands
each,
on.
like both of them?
So I didn't bleed with my second, and I just had, she had antibiotics because of meconium, but that was
Right.
stupid. And they wanted to take her away afterwards. But I said no. And
Yeah.
because I didn't bleed, I ended up having an early discharge, which was great.
Yeah.
Um, So, and she was my posterior baby. So she was a
Aw.
lot more painful. Yeah. It was
Wow.
hectic. My big memory with her was just like as she came like half out, I was like, take her, someone take her. It was just like that was yeah.
Oh my
Um
gosh.
and then one of the midwives that I had and my second birth, I sort of because the experience was so like it wasn't a very nice care. It was just like, oh, she's a hippie who doesn't want to do most of the things we're recommending. It was like this um, annoyance I felt. So I blocked out who that person was for so long. And then later, I think it was my daughter's ninth or 10th birthday, I looked at old birth photos, and the midwife was one of my teachers in the uni when I became a midwife, and I knew her. I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, like, oh, that makes so much sense because I know what she's like. I know what she would have been like with someone like me. But it
Oh,
was interesting that I completely forgot who she was. And then later, it's so interesting how the survival mechanism of the body, you can block something out. And then when you're ready for it, it shows itself. Sort of like the medical records or
yeah.
the picture of this midwife. But yeah, um, birth is tremendous. And it's a shame. I always thought for so long that I had really undisturbed birth, but I didn't at all. Yeah. So,
To think
yeah,
have like one story and then to have that rocked.
yeah, totally. It only makes me want to go and have another baby.
Yeah,
Not
of course.
really, but it just makes me want to have birth so I can experience that
Mm,
that birth without anyone messing around with it. But
mm,
I feel privileged these days that I can support families to have that birth without anyone messing around with it because it
yeah,
deserves to have no one messing around with it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And how were your
So yeah,
postpartum periods with each of your girls?
I think I just soldiered on. I had second degree tears with both of mine, so I had sutures. Um, Looking back now, I wish I didn't because
Yeah.
they're like 14 and 12, and I still have scar tissue that is tender sometimes, and I'm like, fucking hell, like, excuse my language. But now I go to births and they have these second degree tears, and the women are like, oh, should we be suturing? Should I go get some stitches? I'm like, nope. And then it heals amazingly. I was like, that's the way. That's what it should be like. Like vaginas are made to
Yeah.
tear and repair. Like they're pretty magnificent.
Yeah, because
Um,
they can heal more, they can heal back more strong or more strongly when it's not
Much better.
secured. Yeah.
Yeah, much better. And in the hospital they're putting ice packs on there when in reality it's like the worst thing you can do. You gotta put your warm packs.
Mm,
Like it's just so backwards. Um, but yeah. So yeah, lots of change since then, Um, babies, did lots of yoga, became a midwife, gave up my registration,
well,
because I don't want to be in that system
when
anymore.
did you do that?
I left the system last year, but I kept my registration because I was working at an abortion clinic here in town.
Yeah.
And then I let my registration expire this year.
Mm,
Um, yeah, interestingly, I just let it expire. I just didn't renew it. But then they called me because a midwife had complained about me, because I was supporting a woman who was having a breech birth after 2 cesareans, and they wanted to Caesar her. And the woman disclosed to the hospital that she had an ex midwife who had some breech training. So the
mm.
midwives who spoke to went and reported me to APRA and the
Like a
Complaints
literal witch
Commission.
hunt.
Far out, yeah. And I was like, don't worry, I'm not even registered anymore. I'm not doing anything illegal. Um, Yeah. So I'm glad I'm not registered anymore, but I still get calls from the Complaints Commission. And I was like, talk to the woman. Go
Yeah.
talk to the woman. If
Like
she
as
has
if
a
she can't
problem,
make her own decisions.
yeah, like stop helicoptering parenting, like these women are making decisions based on what they want, not
Well,
on what
yeah,
you
it's
think is
like
best for them.
the whole system, the whole medical system has this idea. It was like I was saying earlier that women are like children and can't make their own
Yeah,
informed,
yeah,
intelligent decisions.
yeah. And
And
calling
even if
people
their
criminals
decisions
and
aren't
supporting them.
informed, to just make a decision that they want to make.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So, yeah, lots have been happening. And then another initiation that's really happening at this stage of my life is um, so in 2020, when COVID hit, that's when I started working as a midwife in the hospital. And that's when the girl's father passed away. And that's
Oh,
when my
wow.
mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So, about a year after she was diagnosed, um, I decided to move her in with my children and I. And Spirit gave me a beautiful man, a beautiful, beautiful man. I had been single for so long. I
Mm.
was single for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And and then when my mum got diagnosed and I started working in the system, then Spirit gives me this beautiful angel of a man with so much love that I have never been loved before like this. It's just like,
Oh.
oh, heart shattering every day. Just like, oh, when I don't know, people who are listening who have been single for a long time probably do this when they jump into a relationship. It's like you show all of your yucky qualities because you are just testing this guy to see if he's like the real deal and if he hangs out. And it doesn't matter what I do. This guy is just like, I love you. You're like a queen, you're my goddess. He writes poetry.
Oh,
He's just like so gooey all the time. I'm like, oh my God.
how
So it was
sweet.
very well worth the wait. And he helps out a lot with my mom. My mom is deteriorating like
Mm,
fast. And it's so like this has been a learning journey as well. Like my whole family wanted to put her in a home. It was just too much. And I said no. You know, she comes from a Muslim background where they live for being a mother and nothing else.
yeah.
So she was the best mom. She gave us so much freedom. She was feeding her, you know, she just lives to be in that role of a mom. And now that all of
Mm,
her kids are grown, it's her body response. It's like, well, who am I? You know, like literally, who am I? So
yeah.
it's like it's been huge. Like I go in and out of like, oh, this is so sad. Like she's not who she was. And then there's these other parts of like, whoa, what a privilege that I get to do all of these things. Like, you know, she was the one that was changing my nappy, and then she was changing my kids' nappies, you know, and then bathing them and helping me raise them. And now we're literally doing those things for her. It's like
Wow.
crazy. It's just weird how the way the spirit, you know, grows and changes, and it's crazy. So,
Well, and it's
yeah,
so beautiful that you didn't allow yourself to miss out on this by like putting her
yeah,
in a nursing home or something. And I think, I mean, I have no judgment towards people who make that choice, but
of course.
think that
It's huge.
there is such a beauty in being in right relationship with the aging process and with the family and having
Yeah,
like taking care of your mother and giving back to her in that way. Like I really think
yeah,
that we can give back in that way.
yeah,
And how
yeah,
absolutely like heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time to be
yeah,
doing these things.
yes. And it just shows that no matter what challenges can lie in your life, like that present themselves to you to get through, you're always going to be supported. You know, spirit doesn't give you what you can't handle. Like,
Yeah.
I even, yeah, when everyone was like, oh, you know, you should put her in a home, it's too much, you're going to, you know, it's going to wreck your life. I went and visited the homes and I was like, oh, there's no way that you could live comfortably in this place. Like, it felt like a prison. Like, it just, there was no way. And then it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? I need to find a place. And then Spirit's like, this is the place. I was like, oh, this is kind of perfect. And it's like, I'm going to keep you happy. I'm going to send you this beautiful man, and he's going to keep you very well loved up in between all of those frustrating moments. Your children are older now, so I've got, you know, 14 and 12, and they're going to help. You know, they like to help with the walks and the showers and the bed making and the, you know, like you're constantly supported. Like if it was happening at it when they were younger, or if I was younger, it was like it just wouldn't have worked out. But how everything works out in that divine time, it's kind of perfect. And it's like the more she deteriorates, it's like, well, you know that death is coming. It's not like a sudden bam, like some people experience a loss like instantly, like a car accident or cancer or something. Like they call Alzheimer's like the slow goodbye. It's like you have a lot of time to process.
Mm,
And really, really interesting. I'd love to share. I shared this on one of the calls a little while ago, and I just felt it was so profound. You know, the Free Birth Society, you know, they have those moon calls with Erica. I love them.
yeah.
And this happened like on the night before, and I just had to share it because it was just so epic. Like, I never met my grandparents, and I've always had a really a big connection with my mum's mum. And she's a very big, strong woman. She had 12 kids all at home. You know, I feel her presence. And the other night, I have asthma, and I have not. This is like a month ago. I have asthma, comes and goes with the seasons, but I was having a really bad asthma night,
Mm,
and I was like, "Oh, what is going on?" You know, like, you know, asthma puffer and breath work, and oh no, what's going on? I can't sleep. And then I just sort of tuned into my heart, and I called on my grandma. I could feel her, you know, pouring energy into my heart. And then I just sort of calmed down, and it was all gone. And then looking at her, she showed me. my mum. My mum, what she was like. And my mum was there laughing. And I was like, oh, that's mum. She's with you in spirit. And she's like, yeah, she's here. I was like, but she's still here. And she's like, that's not her. Like she's here with me.
Wow.
We're doing great. She was like giving me all of this love, like, thank you for what you're doing. And it's okay. You're gonna get through it. Don't worry. Fifi's here.
Mm.
My mum's name is Fifi. Because Fifi's here. I'm taking care of her. You just do the rest, which is like the remainder, because it is not
Yeah.
her. Yeah, and that was so special for me. I
Wow.
was like, oh, and I had a great sleep. I was just thought, oh, that is so cool because like they say that Alzheimer's is like the slow goodbye. It's like I think death as you age is kind of like that. You slowly do leave your body, but it was so weird to see that she was already there. Like
Wow.
this part of her is like, yeah, it's so interesting. It's crazy. I'm learning so much from this part of my life and her life.
Yeah, I mean, of
Yeah,
course, it's like so many. We talk often about how, as women, at least in my circles, I feel like we're always talking about how women go through these cycles of death and rebirth. And we talk about it like the other side of the coin of birth is death. But
yeah,
I think like some of us just learn, like we also go through these deeper initiations of death. And while we have death and rebirth in our cycle, and while like bringing a baby to this earth can contain elements of death, like being so
mm,
close to it and watching like the end of someone's life in like you said like this slow way, like what's happening,
yeah,
how
yeah,
what an initiation that is. So do you feel like you
yeah,
learned a lot about death or like had to come
yeah.
to terms with that?
I think I've always been pretty comfortable with death. Like when we were young and we'd lose a family pet, I was always the one in the family that was really okay with it. And all my brothers and sisters would be like, why aren't you sad? Like, why aren't you crying? I was like, because he's not in pain anymore. He's in the best place ever. Like, I think it was from the
Wow.
ayahuasca experience. I feel like
Oh
when you
wow.
travel with Mama Aya, she really shows you that what that realm is, and it's quite alive, it's quite bright, it's like all the good feelings. It's like being in a body is quite dense, and like we see trees as being inanimate, but they're actually moving and they're very active, like they're so in that realm, but we just see them as something that is grounded and rooted and not really. So I think growing up I was always intrigued by death. I always had this inner knowing that it wasn't something to be afraid of. It was when I heard someone had passed away, I was always very like, oh, I'm so happy for them because they're finally free. Like
Mm.
life is awesome, but death is better. Like it wasn't this, it was weird, I know, but it made me, I just always, yeah, I don't know. I just always had this okayness with it. And then that's a bit about my work as well, which is different from being a midwife in the system, being an unregistered birth worker and talking to women about being okay with death. Like you can talk about all the what ifs and should we go to hospital for this reason or should I get the tests or get the scans? And it's like, well, why are you doing it? Are you trying to avoid death? Like death happens.
Mm.
Like it's really hard to have these conversations because we don't talk about them
Yeah.
very much at all. But the more that we realize that death is so much a part of life, the more then you can accept it. And I guess, yeah, like even when I lost the girl's dad, my ex-partner, I was, when I left him in 2013, I had so much bitterness. I was so angry. I was so sad. I was always like, oh, I was just so like so angry at him. I felt like methamphetamines was a mistress. It was his lover compared to
Uh,
me. He chose that, and he had a family, and he just lost it all. I was so like, "Arr!" And I broke off contact with him towards the end because he wasn't contributing anything. I was struggling as a single mom.
mm.
Um, I was getting through uni and I was finding it really hard to even feed them. Like I was working and I was mothering and I was studying and I was having a really hard time. And then I would have to call him, and it was so like, you're not even doing anything and you're so in your disease of addiction. I was just like, "Mm." But then when he passed away, oh my God, there was so much light. There was so much love. There was so much like, it was just like all the good stuff of our relationship. There was no anger at all. And I could feel him. I had visions of him with like long hair and crystal blue water, and he was so happy and he was so free. He wasn't in the addiction anymore. He wasn't in the
Mm.
trauma anymore. He wasn't in the struggle of life. And I felt that and I was like, whoa. So it's like when we are really close with someone and we lose them, I guess you go through that period of sadness that they're not there anymore. But I feel more connected to their freedom, like their new sense of experiencing their true self, which is like divine spirit. It's joy, it's love, it's light, it's all of those really beautiful things. It's like higher than any high. It's like an orgasm a thousandfold, it's like continuous awesomeness. It's like the bliss, the present moment. I don't know. That's just what I feel death really is.
Wow.
And it's a gift once we get there. So it's like having that vision of my mom with my grandma in spirit. I was like, okay, cool. It was a reassurance. She's not suffering. Like when I
Yeah.
see her that she's peeing herself and she can't sleep right and she's tripping and falling and there's so much happening, and I was just like, oh my God, she used to be such a strong woman and she used to be so capable and she used to be able to do all of these things, and now she can't fucking brush her teeth. She can't do anything. But then when I saw her in spirit, I was like, oh yeah, cool. She's already there. Like she's already in that realm. It was reassuring. It was like, okay,
Mm.
I just have to take care of her body, like the leftovers. Her spirit is good.
Mm.
And I even talking to the girls like about their father, I'm like, I feel him all the time saying, please talk about me. Like I want them to know all the good things about me, and I want them to tune into me as like a guardian angel of having
Mm.
someone on the other side that is for them. Like I
Mm.
even like some might think, oh, because they haven't got a dad, it's like a detrimental thing. But it's like, well, he's in spirit realm. He's like, it's better. Like he's working
Yeah.
behind the scenes to help them. Like
When I was
he's
gonna say, and
definitely,
like perhaps he's like a better father there than he could have
yeah,
been on Earth.
yeah, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. So I don't know. I digressed a lot off birth, but I just feel like, I
Well,
mean, off death.
I
But
loved
yeah.
hearing about all of your experiences with learning to feel comfortable with and like really like walk with a deep reverence of death. And I think what
Mm,
that allows women to do, or a person to do really, is like just like really trust each phase of life. Like
yeah.
if you're like not a, if you don't fear death, like wow, like how much enjoyment can you find as you move into
Yeah.
sorceress phase of life and into the crone phase of life and like fully really like claim all of the
Mm,
gifts that each of those phases have and enjoy the aging process. Like that's something that I consciously try to do. Although I'm young, I turned 28 in a few weeks, and so I'm still in my
oh, but
20s.
that's a big fat return.
I know,
That's a big, ooh, like,
but
yes.
just trying to like honor like the aging process and like I'm different than I was in my early 20s, and I'm sure women of any age can understand that. And if we can walk with like reverence for like how each new phase of life initiates us, it's like wow, that's big. And it sounds like you've done that.
Yeah.
You're doing that.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you.
And what a
Thank
beautiful
you.
example for your girls.
Yeah, oh, they are so great. My girls are so great. I am so blessed to have them. Like that, and that's another thing that I'm grateful for my ex. Like even though it was a crazy relationship, he gave me these beautiful girls. Like beautiful. Like, oh my gosh. My youngest likes to wake up and go surfing in the morning. It's like
Oh.
the other one is like staying up, sleeping. They hardly go to school now. They're grown. They know how to read and write. We just have fun now. I just love having them.
Oh.
Oh, they're just amazing. I feel so blessed. And then, yeah, like going back to the death thing, with my beautiful partner that I have now, like there is always a gift in death. We were pregnant last year and we lost that baby
Mm.
at around 20 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was when that happened, I was like, oh, I had this craving to go back to Hawaii and I hadn't been there since I left. So we took the family, the girls and my mom and went to Hawaii
Oh.
2 weeks after not being there for like uh, over 10 years. Saw all the family, was so great. And then that's when Pele, that goddess that I mentioned before, I felt her say to me, you need to go into birth. You need to go, don't worry about being in the system. You're going to be supported. So it was like, you just reminded me of like when we go through this experience of grief and loss, we have a tremendous gain in another way as long as we just like tune into it and be like, oh, you go deep into like, what am I feeling right now? I'm going to have an emotional release. And then it's like, you get this message of like, okay, this is where my life is going right now. And if I didn't go through that grief and that loss, then I wouldn't have this realization and I wouldn't go down this different road, you know?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's the gift in like not seeing death or like really any challenging experience as wrong and
Yes.
seeing it as, like guidance, but also just like knowing that you can still feel the grief and feel the immensity of everything and also know that
Mm,
it's not wrong. And
mm,
I mean, that is a really beautiful, reverent way to walk your life.
yeah. Yeah. I think women do it naturally.
Mm,
The more time we spend in nature, the more time we speak with sisters about things happening in our lives, it just sort of bubbles up. We get these realizations because we're all connected. We're all, we're all magic. Women are so magic.
I know.
Yeah. We can make babies. Like, we grow babies in our bellies and we birth them out of vaginas. Like, come on. Like, doesn't get
Sometimes
more
I think
epic
about
like
that.
that.
Like today I was in line at the grocery store and I was bored. And so I'm just like looking around, looking at all the people in the grocery store. And I was just like, wow, every single one of these people was created in a woman's womb.
Mm,
And
yeah.
just like that thought was like, whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
Mm. Well, Linda, I've really enjoyed like hearing all of these stories and you've kind of brought me, I think, to the present, but I'd love for you to just share how you feel, like where you feel like you are now, like who are you right now?
Um, I am a mother. I am a devoted daughter. I am a lover. I
Mm.
am a beekeeper.
Wow.
I am a gardener. I'm a bodyboarder. I am definitely part of the ocean, first and
Mhm.
foremost. I am a birth keeper. I'm authentic witness of birth. I am a Lomi Lomi masseuse. I
Mm.
am more a woman now than I ever have been. I am, oh, I am, I am that I am, aren't I? I'm a
Mhm.
reflection. I'm a reflection. Um, yeah. So other than focusing on relaxation, going slow, keeping the house in harmony via me being in harmony.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I support women having births at home with their family. I, yeah, that's me. That's all my
Yeah.
role. And it's
I
so
love
exciting.
I loved those descriptors you used. I feel like I just got this like really cool kaleidoscope of who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be heard. Thanks for letting me share. I'm not a very social person. I like my own bubble. So thank you for allowing me to express my story. And I hope your listeners have enjoyed it as well, because I've really enjoyed sharing a bit about me. Thank you, Natalie.
Of course. I mean, it's such an honor, like to come on a podcast and to share your story, to be vulnerable, to open yourself up in a safe way, is medicine for the world. And like I was saying
Yeah.
before we hit record, it's like you never know who is going to resonate with a piece of your story and who's going to connect with it. And I like to
Yeah.
vision this podcast as like we're just weaving this giant web of women around the world who can all be connected by these threads, our red threads that we share, our
Yeah.
womb stories. And I do have one
Mm.
last question, which is the question I ask every guest at the end of the podcast. And that is if there's a piece of womb wisdom, which
Mm.
that's just kind of what I call these like little tidbits of wisdom that we carry around as women. If you had to pick something like that, what might you want to share with the women listening?
I would say appreciate your blood when it comes. Once a month, it is a gift. You can do whatever you want with it to connect with it, whether it's having a bath and watching it as it exits, comes out of your body, and look at, connect with the water, connect with the blood in the water. You can paint with it. You can even drink it. I used to drink it. You
Mm,
can, you can just really connect with it. If you don't want to connect with it, if you find that there's some resistance there, use some nice pads and soak it in water and give it back to the earth. Do not
yeah.
stick any tampons up. Yeah. Do not, you know, use those disposable pads, because that is your spirit. That's your your chi, your life force that you're flushing down. That's yours that you're chucking out, and it's connecting with all the other rubbish. And we don't want that. This is your gift to remind you it's your power. It's really helped me in my life, and I'm really sad that mine's deciding to leave soon.
Mm,
um, yeah, so maybe just that womb wisdom of just like connect with your periods. Like, now
yeah.
that my two daughters are bleeding, I'm teaching them to connect with it. And my partner has a teenage daughter too, and she's starting to connect with it. My
Wow.
girls are teaching her. And it's such a big part. It's such a ritual. Like, we have four bleeding women in this house, and there's always someone bleeding. There's always a bucket of water with pads in it somewhere, and
Oh,
we've normalized it. I think it's really important to talk about our periods. Like, what are you feeling? What's it look like? Like, let's share. I think it's really important not to like keep it to ourselves as like this little disgusting thing that we have to just get through.
mm,
And yeah, that's probably yeah, just celebrate your womb. The womb's fabulous.
she
Mm.
sure is. I love that. I just love hearing that you have a bucket of pads that the women in your family just place. Like, that's such a beautiful image to me. And like, how sweet for that to just be normalized for these teenage
Yeah,
girls. I just
yeah.
absolutely
And then
love
when it's ready, like when we're done, we just pour it in. We have a bathtub that has a hose that goes down to one of our gardens. So we just pour the blood in there, and it just goes down to nurture all of our beautiful gardens.
that. Oh, that's so
It's perfect.
magical.
It's such a ritual that I
It
really enjoy.
is.
It's like this witchy thing that we do. I love it. Yeah.
Oh,
Even the
I love it.
smell of it. I used to love the smell of my period. Like, it's this earthiness. It's just
I
like being in the
know.
jungle. It's like, oh,
I
yeah.
feel like because that's like your essence, like you're smelling like your essence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Like our
feel that.
voice. It's so unique to us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And just so well said. Like, connect with your blood,
Mm.
take some sort of time to engage with it or just rest and, you know,
Yeah.
to honor that. And I love that you've had that since your first bleed and that your daughters get to have that from their first too. Like, what beautiful
Yeah.
generational healing that is for your
Mm.
female lineage. Ah,
Thank
well,
you.
Linda, if you want to share, I'm sure women are going to be wanting to look you up. And so if you want to
Mm.
share where they can find you online and what you're offering online or in person, any of that is welcome.
Thank you. I'm on Instagram, spirit underscore and underscore birth. And my webpage is spiritandbirth.com. And I offer Hawaiian massage, birth support. I created a little online course called The Sacred Mother, which is about your options in and outside the system and how you can navigate having a home birth without anyone. And I also have a couple of masterclasses coming up for parents who are currently pregnant and just want to navigate having birth outside the system, kind of like my other course. But yeah, that's. Oh yeah, and I do trauma debrief and online birth consults as well. Um, yeah, that's me. Thank you, Natalie. Thanks for allowing me to put myself out there. Thanks for listening to
Yeah.
my story. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Linda. It's been so wonderful to hear all of your stories. Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.